hope you don't drown. He helped him. He helped. This is good news for us. That when we doubt God in the middle of everything, he helps us. There's weird doctrines that get sent around where it's unfortunate because there's like this balance between holiness and grace. I don't even know if it's a balance, really. They coexist at the same time. And somehow, some of us, we reach this point, we reject grace, and we just look at holiness. And we come up with weird doctrines like that God will only help you if you're faithful. That he's only kind to you when you're faithful. That he only has grace for you when you're faithful. That's literally anti-Christ. That's literally anti-grace. Right? Grace is unmerited favor. What is merit? Merit is when you do something to deserve something. That's what merit is, right? If you get a merit reward, what are you getting? You're getting a reward that says, you did something good, so we got you this ribbon, right? That's what you're getting. A demerit is when you did something bad, and so we're shaming you for it, right? And then if you do enough demerits, eventually we will punish you for something. And we take those type of things and we try to apply it to holiness. Holiness is by grace. If we reject holiness, we just become miserable people because we're not experiencing that for which we've been saved for. So we've got to get away from this idea that when I fail, God doesn't have grace for me. Or how many times do I have to fail before God doesn't have grace for me? That's a bizarre question. It's completely against what the scriptures say. Because he always has grace for us. In fact, the scriptures say that we have boldness to enter his throne of grace. Not his throne of judgment to the Christian, his throne of grace. We have boldness, meaning I get to just walk right in. I have boldness, not pride, but boldness. I can come anytime I want, and you can too, to where Jesus sits his place of authority, because his place of authority for the Christian is a place of grace, complete favor for you. So when you're drowning, when we have rejected the truths that God has given us for his kindness and his calling for our life, and we have begun to drown because we rejected those things, and then we cry out, Lord, save me, he saves us. Not saves us eternally, that already happened. He delivers us from our situation, or in our situation is probably a better way to put it. That's how gracious he is. You know, the cool thing is, too, when you read here, is verse 31, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. And then he has words to say. You of little faith, why did you doubt? Verse 32, and when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. We'll come back to verse 31. They, plural, climbed, plural, into the boat. So, you know, it's like the implication is that Peter walked back to the boat, and he himself also climbed back into the boat. Not that Jesus, like firemen, carried him and like chucked him in. Been like, whoa, drop some LBs, Pete, what's going on? You know, or something like that. They both climbed into the boat. That even in his failure, Jesus saves him, and he gets to walk with Jesus back into the boat. And when they're in the boat, the wind dies down. But what about what he says? He says, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Praise God for hard words. Because that would be tough to hear. To hear Jesus say, okay, you're with me, we're walking. Because this is before that, right? If we read, it says, immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You little faith, he said, why did you doubt? He's right there with them. Again, we don't know how far this is from the boat, but this is not with the fellas. This is just between him and Pete. And it says, and when they climbed into the boat. So he just, whether it was a whisper or whatever it was, he just tells them, you have little faith. You're not exercising truth and applying truth in your life. That's what faith is. Taking truth and walking or acting in a way that corresponds with that truth. Giving it power. Does that make sense? So he says, you're not doing that a lot right now. And then he says, and this is the question, this has been the tool of my own personal life, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? It's such a great question to ask ourselves when we're experiencing doubt. Why am I doubting right now? Why am I saying to myself right now, you know what God has isn't good enough for me? Or why am I saying, you know what, right now, God can't deliver me out of this? Or why do I say right now, you know what? I don't think what you have is the best, or I don't think you will do what's best for me. I don't think you can preserve me and my identity and my validity to you. I don't think it can be preserved. If I don't have identity and validity from this person or this group or whatever, then I don't think I could survive as a human. That's doubt. What we're saying is, God, what you're saying is not true. So when Jesus comes along and says, why are you doubting? If Jesus says, hey, it's bad to look at porn, why would I say, no, actually, it's good to look at porn? Because it makes me feel this way or that way. When Jesus comes along and says, you know what? If you're relying on chemicals to keep your mood up, weed, alcohol, if you have to come home and have a sixer at night, he says, why do you have to do that? We have to ask ourselves, why do we have to cope with things with Netflix and ice cream? Why do we cope with things with chemicals? Why do we have to do that? Why do we doubt? I mean, I'm not, saying you shouldn't watch a good rom-com. I'm just saying at the end of the day, we have to ask ourselves when we're going through those things, is this really the power life? Is weed really the power life? Am I really the strong person when my life sucks so bad I have to go home and hit the bong multiple times? Am I really going to go from that place and say, I have something great here going on, that I have to literally alter myself chemically to go on with my life? I'm not talking about CBD and pain relief or anything like that. I'm saying when I personally have to take steps to alter my mental status so that I can cope with my life, I'm in a bad place, full stop. And so Jesus comes along and says, why do you doubt that I have the best for you? And here's the kicker to all, part of all of this. If we're going to find out for ourselves, if we're going to find victory over doubt, we have to take the step of faith. We have to be in a position where we let God be who he says he is. We can't continually insist on our ways of comfort and distraction and then wonder, why am I not taken up with Christ? I can't continually fill my eyes and ears with all the entertainment of this world. Again, I'm not saying don't watch TV at night. That's not, the point is don't cope with entertainment. Don't use that to cope. Don't cope with feeding your flesh and making yourself feel better and then go, I never experience the supernatural reality that God has for me. If we don't give him the chance to give us that, why would we experience it? If I'm binging Netflix, trust me, I've watched so much Netflix in my life. But if I'm having a rough time and I go and I binge Netflix for 5 hours and then I go to sleep and I wake up the next morning feeling empty, why would I be surprised by that? Why would I wake up and think, gosh, I thought I'd be really encouraged in the Lord today? Because we are what we eat. Right? And if I try to find comfort in denial of reality, like we talked about earlier with fear, there's no comfort in that. If I try to find comfort in just trying to get anything to get a dopamine hit, whether I'm using opiates or weed or Netflix or chocolate ice cream or whatever it is, they all do the same thing in varying degrees. They give you a dopamine hit. If I'm trying to do that to find comfort I'm doing it wrong. It's not valid. So when Jesus comes along in our life and he says, why are you doubting? That's a question every time that we stop and we go, yes, why? Why am I doubting right now? Why do I think his commandments are lame? Why do I think what he has for me is lame? Why is it that when he says, I have comfort for you, I say, no, you don't? Why is it when he says, I have this action that you could do, this great ministry, I say, no, you don't? Why do I do that? And then we be honest. And the honest is, it's always self-preservation. That we want to make sure that we're taken care of. The only problem is we just don't know how to take care of ourselves like Jesus does. And so we have to be continually inviting him back into our lives, constantly asking, why do we doubt? Verse 32, it says, when they climbed into the boat, the wind died down. Then those who were in the boat worshiped him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. What a mercy that God meets these guys and us in a way that they can comprehend. For whatever reason, they were ready to be done with themselves, or this was such a traumatic event that it allowed them to come to an end where they had nothing else. They finally were willing to worship Jesus. They're finally willing to say, you're the Lord. This is Kyrios, the idea of you're the supreme being of the universe. That's who you are. So they go from being hard-hearted angry, upset about the ministry he forced them into, or however it was that they looked at. And they go to this place instead where they're like, you're the Lord. Whatever you say goes. You know what the great part about this is? In about 3 or 4 days from now, Jesus is going to turn to them and go, why are you guys so dull that you don't understand what I'm trying to tell you in the parables of the kingdom? And then he's going to turn to them and he's going to say, why are you guys always arguing about who's the greatest? And then pretty soon here, there's a Syrophoenician woman. It's a place, she's from a place that was actually judged by God, and it was a prophetic fulfillment that her country was judged by God. It was destroyed by an earthquake and then a wave, but there were survivors, obviously. She comes to the Lord for a healing for her daughter, and because of where she's from, the disciples go, get her away from us. That's these guys. They're going to make more mistakes. They're going to have more issues. They're going to struggle with their faith more. Peter still has yet to be 3 times say, I don't even know this guy. Stop talking to me just because I have a Galilean accent. I've never seen this dude in my life before. He's still going to do that. They're going to fail, and they're going to fail, and they're going to fail. And there's Jesus going to be to have grace, and have grace, and have grace upon them. And he's going to continue to lead them on. He's going to continue to invite them into ministry. He's going to continue to invite them to be a part of what he's doing in his kingdom. He's going to continue to invite them to eat with them. That's his commentary in Luke when they have the Lord's Supper, the final supper that he's on the earth. And he says, with great desire, I've wanted to eat with you guys. Isn't that wild? That's wild to me. That he's about to be crucified. Peter's about to forsake him. Mark's about to wriggle out of his robe and run away in just his little funky underwear thing that they wore, right? They're all going to, that's what's about to happen. And he says, I just want to be with you guys tonight. The Lord of glory, the ruler of the universe, the one who will return with fire out of his eyes and a sword out of his mouth and human blood dipped in his robe in blood from, it says, threshing out or stomping out the winepress of war. These radical, gory depictions of the judgment of Christ upon the unbeliever, the wrath of God upon sin, that Jesus of Revelation, he's going to return. But in this case, at this time, he says, I just want to eat with you guys. The last thing I want to do on the earth before I go through, you know what I want to do? I want to eat with you. I want to hang out with you guys. That's mind-blowing. And that's the Jesus that we serve. It's the Jesus who invites us to go along with him and all of that he has for us. It's the Jesus that has grace and kindness and, praise God, hard words for us. Why would we doubt him? Why would we come to a place in our life where we say, this isn't good? When he says, no, I have something great for you.